So we are obviously disappointed by today's verdict. We respect the jury's decision, but we obviously strongly disagree with it. We, in good faith, brought this case, and I am convinced to this day that we had compelling evidence that showed that there was proof for every element of every one of the offenses that we charged. The jury took a different view. That is, of course, their right. That's the part of the decision. I want to start out by commending the trial team, Mr. Hagerman, Ms. Johnson, Ms. Headley, who did an excellent job. I wouldn't have done anything different. I thought they brought a compelling case to bear. I also want to commend the family of tyre-nichols, who showed extraordinary grace and resilience through an incredible ordeal, an unimaginable ordeal. It's hard for me to understand, as I'm sure it's hard for the public to understand, or many in the public anyway, who watched that video, who heard the testimony, who heard the compelling arguments of trial counsel. It's hard for us to imagine how someone could say that none of the defendants were guilty of any of the charges. I personally think any fair-minded person who watches the video would come to the conclusion that everybody there had some responsibility for tyre-nichols' death. But as I said, the jury took a different view. What I do know is this: tyre-nichols is dead and deserves to be alive. And that is a tragedy. It's my hope that the public understands that this is part of the system, and that our office will continue to push for accountability for everybody who violates the law, including, if not especially, those who are sworn to uphold it.
What do you think what just didn't connect? What do you think it was? Was it the training? Was it the character witnesses? What do you think it was?
It's so hard to figure that out. It could be any number of a million things, and I am disinclined to try to say, oh, we should have done this differently or we should have done that differently, because I think the trial team did an excellent job. Obviously you had a situation where, arguably two of the more culpable defendants were not present. Then that allowed the remaining defendants to point the finger at others. I personally think that when you take a look at all of the evidence, that shouldn't matter. Perhaps the jury took a different view. It's just impossible to say.
I know it's very early, but is this a case that you all are looking to retry?
I think it is too early for us to say that. I don't know what the grounds would be for that. We do have to accept the finality of a jury verdict in most cases.
Any thoughts about the jury being from Chattanooga and an all-white jury?
Obviously, people have mentioned that as an issue. I'm not going to speculate about that. I think it's a testimony to the fairness of our criminal justice system that we bent over backwards to get a jury from another jurisdiction to assure that the defendants were given a fair trial. Beyond that, I don't think I should comment.
The defense worked on pointing at Emmett Martin as the most violent of everyone there. It seems that the man have landed with the jury. You're securing a guilty plea for Emmett Martin. Can you talk a little more about his involvement?
Well, obviously, I think the proof speaks for itself, and Mr. Martin was, extremely involved and culpable, and played a key role in the unjustified death of tyre-nichols. What's going to happen over at the federal court and what will happen with his case remains to be seen.
What kind of conversation did you have with tyre-nichols' family when they left today?
We spoke to them briefly. Obviously, they were devastated. I think you could imagine that they would be devastated. I think they were outraged, and I think we can understand why they'd be outraged by this result, given the evidence. They quite understandably decided that they needed to go home and process all this, and we're going to give them that respect and respect their privacy.
What sort of message does this give to specifically the Memphis Police Department, who just got done with this pattern and practice investigation and really doesn't have to grapple with the consequences of that either.
Right. So it's important to note that, you know, there have been guilty verdicts over on the federal side. I'm not going to speculate about what will happen over on the federal side, but it's not like there have been no consequences whatsoever from the tragic killing of Tyre-Nichols. I personally think that if we're going to make any sense of this tragedy, if we're going to have any silver lining from this dark cloud of both the event itself and, in my view, today's verdict, it has to be that we need to reaffirm our commitment to police reform and to doing what we need to do to make sure that tragedies like this don't happen again. And I remain committed to that. I'm sure the city of Memphis remains committed to that, and we're not giving up on that.
Are
How
you
much-
surprised that they didn't, because they could have gone for lesser charges than second-degree murder? What, 9 different charges they could have gotten, and they didn't even have to go to those? Does that surprise you?
Was I surprised that there wasn't a single guilty verdict on any of the counts or any of the lesser included offenses, given the overwhelming evidence that I think that we presented? Yes, I was surprised. Do I have an explanation for it? No.
How much did the state rely on the videos from that night, the Sky Cop video, the body cam videos? How much did you all rely on that as far as this trial goes?
Well, I mean, you saw the evidence. You saw the trial as well as I. I think it speaks for itself. Certainly the videos were a big part of the state's case, as they understandably would be. But I don't think the trial team relied entirely on the videos. I think they brought to bear witness testimony, very effective cross-examination of the defense witnesses, and some compelling opening and closing arguments. And I think when you add it all together, I think the state did a hell of a job. I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking about any of the decisions the trial team made. I think they did an excellent job. They're a credit to our office. You know, anybody who does any kind of jury trial work knows that you just can't predict what a jury will do. Them's the breaks, and it's a bitter pill to swallow, particularly in a case like this. But like I said, we can strongly disagree with the jury's verdict, but we nonetheless respect the jury.
Do you have any messages for people in the community who have had direct confrontations with not only the Scorpion team, but other police officers? There are federal lawsuits that are currently underway, people who have accused the Memphis Police Department of brutality. Do you have any message to them?
I guess my message to the community would be twofold. A, even if you were out there outraged by this verdict, you know, please respond in a lawful, peaceful manner. Second, as I said earlier, with respect to any charge of violation of the law, including by those who are sworn to uphold it, we'll enforce the law. And just as we did aggressively in this case, we'll do that in any other case in which the facts and the law suggest that anybody in the law enforcement community or anybody else has violated the law and used excessive force.
Does Mr. Hagerman or Headley or Johnson
Yeah.
have any comment
Yeah,
about
please.
the jail tried the case?
Packard?
We tried real hard. We fought real hard in there. We knew this was always going to be difficult. As DA Mulroy said, we're trying the 3 least culpable in terms of, obviously, Mr. Martin was the primary actor, and he's entered a guilty plea. Mr. Mills, with the baton strikes, again, a primary actor, and he's entered a guilty plea. So we knew this trial would be hard. I think y'all saw us fight in there. We did the best we could, and the family, they've been great through this. Today's heartbreaking to them, but they've been with us fighting.
What is it like for you all to go through all of this and looking at the video and talking with the family and definitely expecting something else?
You know, it's disappointing. It's heartbreaking. You try cases. It's a business of trying cases, though. Okay? There's always risk and there's reward, but we keep on going. We try to get justice. And I think we tried hard in there this week to get justice. I know the family was behind us, and, you know, we didn't get the result we wanted or they wanted, but they've thought about Tyree, obviously, a lot this week, and they're thinking about Tyree now. And
Melanie?
it's been hard.
Tanisha? Anything?
Was there any bit of evidence
Excuse me.
that was presented over the last week and a half, or any argument made by the defense that felt particularly salient to you guys that you kind of were like, this kind of sucks to deal with and try and like move around?
I don't think we can at this point sort of like I said, Monday morning quarterback or think retroactively about this or that. This blow was particularly powerful, that one was particularly powerful. I think structurally, as Mr. Hagman has already mentioned, the two defendants who were most culpable weren't present in the courtroom, right? That doesn't mean that the remaining three defendants weren't culpable. You heard our arguments in there about criminal responsibility, people being responsible for the acts of another, the duty to intervene, the duty to take affirmative steps at what was clearly, a person being beaten to death. That was a structural part of the trial that was a challenge for the trial team. Other than that, I think it's hard to identify any one thing, and it's hard to get inside the mind of the jury.
Will this verdict, is this going to affect Emmett Martin's plea deal at all, or any sentence he may receive when he does plead guilty?
That's up to the federal court. We really can't speculate on
What
that.
about on the state level?
Well, I think we're not really prepared to talk about that just yet, because what we're doing is we're waiting to see what happens over with the federal sentencing. And once we see what happens with the federal sentencing, we'll have a better idea of what we want to do with that case.
And my last question about the jury, because obviously the jury made the decision, but those who don't understand the process, I know you all want an unbiased jury, but why Chattanooga? Where did that come from as far as that jurisdiction?
I wouldn't know. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
There was a motion filed to defense to change venue, and there was a study done of the amount of publicity in the various large cities in Tennessee, and it was found that Chattanooga had the lowest amount of pretrial publicity with regard to this case, and so that's why it was chosen.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Could we do personally, anything to add or?